Welcome to the RJLT Economics. In this podcast, I want to present my views on this so-called Russian invasion story, which has been promoted by the US and UK governments and media. And my views on this issue are based on all the available information at this moment, which is the 21st of February 2022. In this podcast, I want to first give a little background about this Russian invasion story, because otherwise I think perhaps some listeners may not be fully familiar with the situation, but I will keep it very brief because I trust that you will be able to find more complete information elsewhere. And then I want to present my views on three main blocks. The first block, I want to convince you that nobody will gain from a military conflict. Not the Russians, not the Ukrainians, not the Europeans, and not even the Americans or the British. And the second block, I want to present my view on why exactly the Anglo-American establishment wish to play this Ukraine drama, and what they aim to gain from it, and what they expect to gain from it. In short, it is to keep Europe down, to keep the European states in line. And in the third block, I want to present some of the possible resolutions to this problem and what may be some of the possible outcomes. Okay, first things first. What is this Russian invasion story about? Well, the thing is, in 2014, aided by some forces, let's say mostly the State Department in the US, there was an armed coup in Ukraine. And after this coup, the new government decided that they decided to take away the rights of minorities. You see, Ukraine as a state is an invention of chiefly Lenin, Vladimir Lenin, and Stalin. They created this state out of the old territories of Ukraine with some parts of Russia, and then they also annexed, mostly by Stalin, parts of Poland. So there are, and also Hungary. So there were lots of minorities, and there are varying interests in this country. When some minority rights were being taken away, there were some conflicts, and this conflicts in the beginning was in the form of protests, but then the president of Ukraine at the time decided to send the military in to suppress this protest, and this, of course, eventually led to the first kind of civil war in the eastern regions of Ukraine. And these were the Russian-speaking regions, and they, of course, were supported by Russia as well. Now, fast forward to last year, there were different motivations, and I will explain these motivations in the second block of today's podcast. But with these different motivations, people from chiefly, again, the State Department in the US decided to start to play up this conflict again in order to achieve what they want to achieve, which in my opinion is to chiefly keep Europe down. And so that was developing, and eventually from, I think, at the end of last year, government officials and US media started to talk about imminent Russian invasion of Ukraine in order to topple the Ukrainian government, to implant a puppet government, and then perhaps to annex some territories. So this is basically the background. Now let's move on to the first block. I want to present very simply we can divide this again into two sub-blocks. Let's call it 1A and 1B. 1A is that the Russians, the Ukrainians, and the Europeans are not going to gain from any military conflict, whichever side wins. If the Russians invades, let's just say if the Russian invades, the Russians will face, of course, severe sanctions by all the major economies, right? They have very good relationship with China, but China cannot defend an outright invasion of Russia, by Russia, of a sovereign country without any provocation. So Russia will be isolated. The Russian economy will be much worse than it is now, and Russia does not really gain anything from it, because while its economy is doing quite well, it does not, and its territory is already very big. Its resources, there's really a lot more natural resources than the Russian people need. There is really no rational reason to invade and annex a region that does not bring anything extra that is needed while getting yourself isolated internationally. So Russians don't gain from it. The Ukrainians don't really gain from it because, well, if the Ukrainians could win, they may benefit from it. But the fact is, the Ukrainians would not win any military conflict with Russia, and therefore they cannot really gain anything. When they lose, part of their territories could be annexed, the government will be toppled, the oligarchs will lose their power, lose their control of the country, and perhaps arguably some Ukrainian citizens who don't like the current government may find it better to be part of the Russian Federation, maybe, but for the Ukrainian establishment, there is nothing to gain. For the Europeans too, nothing is to be gained. There will be a lot of refugees from Eastern Europe that flow into Western Europe, further adding to the burden of these countries. Their energy resources are dependent on the Russians, and with a military conflict, they will be forced to minimize their ties with Russia, and that means that their energy costs will rise significantly. Their economies, already very much weak, and in my personal opinion, already on the way to collapse, will basically collapse, and we will see a lot of social problems that had been papered over by money printing will no longer work. Those problems will become evident, and all these European establishments will again lose control. Nobody can gain from it. So this is 1A. 1B is that even the British and the Americans are not really going to gain from a military conflict. Yes, they could gain in terms of information. In information war, they are going to win. They can continue to demonize the Russians. They also, again, even by having this war, they will be able to keep the Europeans down. But really, they are going to suffer economically as well. Because internationally, the inflation is already very high, largely thanks to the money printing program in the US. But with a military conflict, especially involving a major exporter of energy, what's going to happen is, of course, energy prices will rise, and trade will be also further impeded, and the British and the American economies will also suffer, perhaps to a lesser degree, but also severe enough, in fact, that some of the governments, in fact, both of those governments, will not be re-elected. And in the case of the British one, I think there will be a vote of no confidence. In the American one, there will be likely a complete landslide of Republican victory. That, of course, will be not what the establishment want. So this is Block A. Now let's move on to Block B, which is why, given that nobody really gains from a military conflict, there is this continued push of this Ukraine drama, that there is imminent invasion, that they would invade at a certain date, right? And there's always 2 days away from invasion. There's always 1 day away from invasion. But exactly why this drama is being played? In my belief, and we can just basically say it's very simply put, as I mentioned, it is to keep the Europeans down. Now, why is this so? I think the chief reason, the most direct link of this entire thread since the start of this Ukraine drama is, of course, the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. With this gas pipeline, indeed, just as the Americans repeatedly say, Europe will have a closer relationship with the Russians, because they will be basically getting their energy to a more direct extent from the Russians. In the past, of course, there's already Nord Stream 1, and there are several other European pipelines, some of them dating back to the times of the Soviet Union, right? So there's already very, very much high dependence of a lot of the Europeans on Russian energy. But with this new gas pipeline, what is really posing here is that dependence will be, on the one hand, even higher by the Europeans on Russian energy. But at the same time, they will also extinguish the hope of some Americans of selling the Europeans their own energy, which of course is important as well. And finally, and perhaps this is a point that I'm not seeing anyone really talking about, which is that Russia has this plan, I think with China, they have this plan to bring Germany into some sort of common understanding, not really an alliance, but really a common understanding of independent states, right? So the idea is that to have Germany, which is the most important power, the central power of Europe, to have Germany rather acting as a vassal state of the United States, have Germany be an independent player on the international stage, have Germany act in the interest of its own people, have Germany act to some extent in the interest of the Europeans. But this, of course, would necessitate having Germany relying less on the Anglo-Americans and having somewhat of a closer tie with the Chinese and with the Russians. With the Chinese in terms of trade, with the Russians in terms of energy. This is, I believe, the hope of the Russian and the Chinese leaders. But of course, I think also it is something that the Germans, especially the German business community, understand this. I think they understand this. And some of them may be in favor of it, others must not be. Such is the current state, right? So by playing with this Ukrainian drama, the hope by the Americans is to cut this Nord Stream 2 pipeline, to preferably even to just to bomb it. I think there was some a discussion that the Americans I don't quite remember whether it's the British or the Americans who suggested basically bombing this pipeline in order to make sure that it is never going to be online. So they want to cut this pipeline for sure, and then they want to isolate the Russians, and by isolating the Russians, they also achieve the isolation of the Chinese, and this means that they will be able to have a tighter control of Europe, and thereby controlling basically the international situation, right? Because when they have the European Union firmly under their feet, they will have a very strong hand when compared to all the other developing countries or third world countries, as they used to say, who are basically disorganized and really in a weaker position economically and politically, also militarily. So that, in my belief, is why there is this drama. The goal is to keep the Europeans dependent on the Anglo-Americans, and also to keep them in line, to make sure that they are not going to disagree with the Anglo-Americans, to make sure that they are going to follow all the orders, however detrimental to their own interests, of the Anglo-Americans. So that is overall the aim. Having said that, there is a small thing that I want to add here. Let's just say this block 2B, right? A small thing, a small comment that I want to add here, which is that, and I'm not entirely certain about this, but this is really based on my view of the situation. And the view is that I said Anglo-American many times in this podcast, but really it is American. The Anglo part is really the wish of the British, chiefly the English. The English, led by the BJ, Boris Johnson, at this time, still think that they are an imperial power. It has always been said, it has been frequently said, that Boris Johnson loves to imagine him to be Winston Churchill. And imagining himself to be Winston Churchill, he wants to defend the interests of the British Empire and to defend the British Empire. And he also, I believe, imagines the Americans to be an extension of the British Empire. And hence, he is so eager to get on board get in line and really willingly push for the agenda that really is primarily devised by the leadership, the establishment in the United States, in the State Department, in the National Security Council, and of course by the leaders of the Democratic Party chiefly, but a huge section of the Republican Party as well. So what I'm saying here is really that indeed, the goal of the Ukrainian drama is not necessarily to keep the British down. They don't need to try to keep the British down because the British are willingly acting as a vassal state. All right, so that's the second block. Now let's move on to the third block, which is my views on what could be some of the resolutions of the situation. I really see two ways out of this situation. I think without a military conflict, and worst comes to worst, there is a military conflict. First is basically if at certain point Russia realizes that, or not necessarily realizes, but Russia believes, the Russian leadership believe that there is really no hope with Europe. That Europe as an entity is in the foreseeable future going to be part of the American empire, that the Europeans will continue to act in the interests of the Americans, of the Anglo-American center axis. And with this understanding, with this realization, the Russia decides actively to cut the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And they say that, we are not that interested in continue to operating this gas pipeline, and instead we want to divert our attention, our economy to pivot our economy to maybe to Asia, and bye-bye. So with this in mind, then I think perhaps this will be kind of like a concession, and the Americans will have achieved their goals, which is to keep the Europeans down, and this will lead to a resolution of, I think, the Ukraine drama. There will not be a military conflict. There will not be a false flag, and the big losers, of course, in this case, will be the Europeans. The Germans will suffer the most. I can easily foresee that a lot of their industries, which require a lot of energy, the manufacturing industries, will really suffer dramatic decline due to rising energy costs. And across Europe, the economies will weaken. And I think in the near future talk more about the EU, the European economy. But my view, long-term view, is that there is no long-term for the Eurozone. That the Eurozone will cease to exist in the medium term. And this is because of unsustainable levels of debt, slow growth, low negative interest rate, which basically has led in the last decade Europe into a condition that's known as stagflation. Basically, you see there's some inflation, maybe not very high, but there is a stagnation. There's stagnation, and real interest rates are negative. That's basically what it is, what it has been, and I think it will worsen. There are ways out of it for sure, but I think under the control of the US establishment, it is not possible for Europe to act as sovereign states. It is not possible for them, therefore, to resolve this issue. So that's the first possible resolution. The second possible resolution is that, and this is I think, the stark opposite of the first possibility, which is that Russia keeps on, but without any military action. And then, because there is this continued talk of war in Ukraine, we already are seeing rising oil prices. If oil price breaks all-time high, and now I think it's maybe around 100, less than 100, if oil price breaks all-time high and reaches $150 a barrel, the political pressure in the United States will be so strong, especially since this year is an election year. There will be so much political pressure in the United States that the Biden administration will have to stand down. They would have to say, okay, we have seen that the Russians have given us enough confidence that there will not be an invasion. The situation, well, is not very good. It's going to quiet down. And with that attempt, they will try to really lower the oil price in order to, of course, control the inflation in the United States. Because everyone knows that with high inflation and rising oil price, it is very difficult to win an election. And so they may want to have that under control, and with economic pressures, they retreat and stop pushing for this Ukraine drama. That's the second possibility, second possible resolution. And of course, the third one is really not really a resolution, but a violent end to the story, which is that perhaps there will be a false flag, and then there will be a military invasion, and then, things will play out. With the only possibility of the second point, which is that the United States, the US, Anglo-American establishment decide to stop playing this Ukraine drama. This is the only possible way for Europe to have some sort of possible future of some possible a slight hint of independence. That is the only possibility. With the first resolution or with any military conflict, the end result will be that Europe will be confirmed to be kept down, and they will not be. They were proven to be not sovereign countries. They do not have any. They don't have any control over their own interests. And in the near future, there will, at least near to medium future, the situation is not going to change. But in the medium to long term, as I have said, I think that the European economy will collapse, the Eurozone will cease to exist, and the European Union, as it is today, as it is constituted today, will also cease to exist. But I think some sort of free trade zone, some sort of free trade alliance, and perhaps even some form of European Union, perhaps still called European Union, will continue to exist. I'm not predicting the collapse, the fall of a civilization, but just a collapse of some political institutions. All right. So this is my view on really the main aims to play that the Anglo-Americans are playing this Ukraine drama. If I hope that you will have found something interesting in this podcast. If so, please give me a thumbs up and share it and subscribe to all the things if you like to. Anyways, have a great day, and I will see you for the next time.